John, appreciate you hopping on today. Fastbreak's definitely taking the sports world by storm, and so excited to hear a little bit about the journey and what you're doing today and where you guys are headed. So thanks for hopping on.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate the time, Andrew. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about Fastbreak and sort of our approach to sports technology and the whole sports marketplace.
So the scheduling side has been always a little bit a part of what you've done for, a little bit of your career. Tell us about your last one. Obviously, it went through an acquisition, you grew it. Give us the details, how you built it, scaled it, and then ultimately we'll start to dip into what you're doing today in the sports side of things.
Sure. So the last company was called MapAnything. It was a geoanalytic and field sales, field service optimization platform built on top of Salesforce.com. So we were in that enterprise software ecosystem. The product started off as more pins on a map, and then over time it turned into sort of hardcore scheduling and route optimization for field sales or field service. A lot of people don't think about this, but let's say you're running a company, an HVAC company, and you have 10 technicians and 400 tickets. Certain technicians have certification on certain systems. Some speak Spanish, some don't. Inventory and truck is different. So the whole idea behind a product like MapAnything was, optimize distribution of work to, efficiently handle all those tickets. So, when we were building that company, I had to recruit a team of PhDs to build this route schedule optimization functionality. Nothing like this had been built in, honestly, about 25 years. They successfully built that piece of technology. We continued to grow the business. We got to about $22 million in recurring revenue. And then Salesforce actually acquired it in May of 2019 and rebranded it to Salesforce Maps. Now, while this is going on, I have 5 boys. They all play sports. They all play travel sports. And so sports is a pretty big part of, our life here in the Stewart household. They all play multiple sports, so it's a year-round thing. While I might complain about, the cost and all the travel and all that stuff, I love the fact that that's where they put so much time and attention, as opposed to simply sitting in front of, video games all day. So, it was such a big part of my life. And then when I was sitting out my non-compete period after the acquisition for a couple of years, thinking about what I did want to do the best and do next, one of the gentlemen that I recruited, Chris Grower, who along with Tim Carnes are my co-founders here at Fastbreak. These are the PhD math geniuses that built that engine. They had a background in sports scheduling for a variety of reasons. Chris found sports scheduling as sort of a side hustle. Started off scheduling at his kitchen table to help out his sister-in-law at the time, who was the head coach of University of Knoxville women's soccer. And she was sort of complaining that her season was starting with 4 away and maybe he could help since it's a math problem. And, when his prior company, before I recruited him, KPMG, acquired that company, he wound up on a project with the NBA building their first in-house system really for sports scheduling. So one of the things Chris and I always spoke about was, man, this is it's something done by consultants. Wouldn't it be great if we build, an entire company and business around a software platform for actually doing what is one of the most complex problems in the world? And, so that non-compete was up, as I said, in May 25th, 2022. We formed this company in July 2022, July 7th, 2022. And, we're just about 2 years in. And in that time, we've got a great number of customers. It's growing. We've got some exciting things to announce soon. But it's really gratifying to tackle one of the most challenging problems in the world. And really, people never even think about, all the complexity of building a professional sports schedule or even a college sports schedule. But it's a really challenging problem.
When you looked at the sports landscape, what did you see there? Like, you have to start basically from ground zero. Obviously, your kids are playing. But when you looked at technology in sports, what did you start to uncover? What were some initial insights that may have led to how you're thinking about and how you currently are building the company?
Sure. So I sort of think of sports and sports technology plays in 2 groups. And this is sort of going back to my days in sort of software, enterprise SaaS business software. On the equivalent of the enterprise side would be professional. And that's both tier 1, tier 2 professional sports. Tier 1 professional sports, if you've got $1 billion in revenue or more, you're tier 1. there's probably 20 of those leagues around the world. There's 5 in the US, 3 in Australia, 1 in India, and the rest are in Europe. That's it. And then there's a huge amount of tier 2. There's probably about 200 of those leagues around the world. The tier 2 is anything under that $1 billion in revenue. And it's interesting is that's actually drawing, as you know, a lot of money these days. Like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, all of a sudden, sports leagues and franchises became an asset class. And I know you've covered that a bit. And so you've got a lot of money coming into that space. And so these leagues are popping up. And there's opportunity there because as they get organized and those newer leagues are adopting technology faster. And then you have college as well, which I would say that's also professional sports at this day and age. I mean, I don't think anybody would look at the SEC football media rights deal and say it's not professional at this point. So, you look at that and say, okay, that's the segment of sports technology we can apply to the enterprise space. And then you have this $38 billion a year monster, which is youth travel sports, right? Well, a lot of articles have been written on that. And that's sort of the consumer world, if you will. And that's projected to grow to 85 billion by 2035. There are a lot of, there's sort of a lot of companies that start there, try to work up, and there's a lot of challenges. So as I looked at the sports space, what we figured is we've got some pretty unique intellectual property and technology around our scheduling engine. So we attack professional first and then sort of use that as a brand exercise to say, now we're going to move into youth and try to use that brand that we're already building to, try to have a logical approach to, going after youth. Youth is very challenging, as you know, because of extreme fragmentation, right? It's male, female, it's regional, it's seasonal, it's by sport. It's very, very difficult to get that flywheel going. You wind up specializing in different silos. And, so I think a lot of times when you look at doing investment, you have to choose either or. We're sort of doing both because we think that what we're doing at the pro level will feed our ability to get the flywheel going at the youth level. And that's more or less how we see the landscape currently.
Yeah, and talk about the scheduling side for the pro leagues, right? Obviously, you had to get in with the NBA and one of your co-founders. What exactly is that platform? What's it doing? What does that product look like for Fastbreak?
Sure. So that's a complete software package that allows the NBA to do the entire process, start to finish, of building their schedule. They're actually in the process of doing their schedule right now. They're using our software. It actually starts, and this is people will be interested, the whole process actually starts in November. So if you break down how that 1,230 game schedule gets built, in November, the teams have to provide venue availability, right? In other words, what dates can we possibly host the games? And they're required to provide for 41 home games a certain number of dates. And they'll make requests like, I can't have a home game this night, we have a Rihanna concert, or we need a home game because we're retiring this player's number. And that's the kickoff, that's the start of the scheduling process. So that right there is 30 sets of rules or constraints, if you will, for each team, and there's multiple in there. So there's a bunch of rules right there. And then you get to, media rights, right? So the NBA currently has 3 customers. I know they're going to be different customers soon, but it's currently TNT, ABC, ESPN, and they have requests about what they'd like to see. A certain number of games for the Warriors or the Boston, or when KD is traded, maybe it's a certain number of KD games, and we need them on these nights. And so those are rules or constraints or preferences that go into it. And then it's the normal competitive definition or competitive rules that you have to define for setting up this problem. So what our software lets you do is it lets you define each and every one of these things as input to a really complicated math problem. And those fairness rules might be no 4 and 5s, minimize 7 and 5 and 7s, 8 and 11s, all sorts of combinations. No back-to-backs over a certain number of travel miles. That's unfair. Try to keep rest and balance pretty equal throughout the league, rather, between teams. All things that lead to basically a competitive schedule. And to the NBA's credit, they're really, really concerned with making sure that they produce a really fair, competitive schedule that doesn't disadvantage any team, too much. It's funny, like if the software does its job correctly, everybody will hate the schedule equally, right? If somebody's like, oh man, I love our schedule, that means someone probably messed up. They should all hate it equally is what they should do. So that's what the software does. So all these rules get, sent to this engine, and it starts literally calculating billions of times a second with potential schedules. And it gets to a point where the math engine takes it as far as it can. It goes back into the UI, and then the humans can actually sort of touch it up, drag and drop style, while we still enforce the rules while they sort of make those moves, and they resolve to a final schedule. They pass it to the teams, and then they announce it on TV usually. So that's the process. And what's funny is you don't think about this, but that scheduling process starts in November and ends in August, and then there's only a little bit of gap of time, and the whole thing starts all right over again.
Nuts. And then obviously you've taken that horizontal and downstream a little into other pro leagues
Sure.
and some of the colleges. Now, on the youth side, how are you thinking about that? Is it the similar type product? Are there other extensions of it? Or what does that look like?
Well, certainly the user experience is going to be completely different. We're working on that now. We have plans around it. We'll have some announcements in September on that. The engine itself, really, you have almost as many complicating factors in youth. This is full, obviously there's public knowledge, but MLS Next, which is the premier men's youth developmental soccer league in the United States, they use our solver. Basically, we use our solver for, solving that problem, both their league play and their tournament play. And I'll tell you, their scenarios are almost as complicated as a pro league when you look at, age group, skill levels, field availabilities, travel concerns. You're balancing a lot of things. And so the engine, if you will, the math engine, is just as applicable to youth. What does change is the user experience and the additional set of services that you have to design and build around that UI. And so we're well into the development on what our offering is going to look like there. We sort of did the hard part first, which was solve the math problem, right? And and now that we have that and we feel comfortable with that at many different types of youth leagues and levels, then it's a matter of putting out that product.
And do you think of anything from a product lens ancillary, or, if you take care of the whole ecosystem from pro all the way to youth or grassroots, what is next for Fastbreak? Where do you think next? You build better products, you build things that come off of it. Is it more vertical, more horizontal, more global? What does that look like, or what's the thinking for the roadmap?
Well, on the pro/college stack, we're going to push our way down to the team level. There's, we're in development. I'm not going to get too specific, but we're working on a product for professional basketball and professional football teams. We're actually sort of in development or co-development with two professional organizations for a need, around our optimization core skill set. So there's an opportunity there. It would apply to almost all 153 professional teams in the United States. I always forget. There's 29 in Major League Soccer. So
I think it's like 152 or 152. Something. Yeah.
It's something weird. But so it would apply to almost all 152 of those teams. So there's an opportunity there. We are starting to look at, to incorporate into professional schedules predictive rating models. We feel very, very excited about the work that we're doing in this area. We hope to combine that with scheduling so that you can do scheduling based off, and eyeballs. And so that's a natural fit at the pro level, where media rights deals are such a driver now of, how a league wants to operate. And as these deals get larger and larger, case in point, you look at what the NBA did recently with their new media rights deal. It's amazing. And then on the youth side, I think it's all about basically reducing friction in that whole travel sport marketplace. Now, a lot of sports, in the youth, it's either collegiate, school-based, like their high school sports, or, like the local. But really, most of the economic drivers are in the tournament travel sports, whether it's travel lacrosse, volleyball, baseball, basketball, you name it. And there's a lot of friction in those processes. There's a lot of disconnection. And our product strategy is about trying to do a frictionless, seamless start to finish process that starts at the athlete and ends, basically with the tournament director and all the ancillary services around those tournament directors.
And how do you think about, or how do you navigate the fragmentation in the youth sports, or has that played an impact yet, or will it?
Well, the way we're mitigating it is there is a repeatable model, whether what sport you play, and that's these multi-day tournaments. So when you think about it, doesn't matter the sport or the time of year, those tournament models are all the same. And so we're focusing our development, our time, and our technology on that particular piece of it. It's also the highest economic impact. If you take a look at some of these tournaments, there's a big one in Atlanta every year for baseball. There's a massive one for women's basketball in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
That's tens of millions of dollars in economic impact. And so there's opportunity to disintermediate non-technology based approaches on how they manage a lot of these things. And whenever you can do that, there's opportunity for technology and business. And we feel we have an interesting anchor point, which is there are also some of the most complicated scheduling problems, and there's no one in the space that actually can solve those scheduling problems because they're not able to invest in an engine like we did because it's being driven by the pro leagues, right? Well, we have that technology, we can plug it in.
Right. And we've talked a lot about the service component and what you're providing to customers, clients from an internal lens. Obviously, you had the in with the MBA. I don't know if you guys did their, I don't know what they call it, launchpad or accelerator. And then you've recently raised or have raised another round. As a founder, having built another company into this one, how do you approach that journey?
Mm-hmm.
How have you gone about making sure you have the necessary capital to build a elite product while also serving all the other growth needs that a company needs?
Sure. So the MBA was an equity investor in our seed round. This most recent round was a safe. That we have, just like last round, it was a combination of strategics and, money or capital. I sort of try to build and weaponize, if you will, the cap table the same way. It's a mix of larger checks, which are more institutional or big check writing investors, and then smaller checks from people that are in the space, know the space well, can bring influence, can help with reach. And I think every founder should try to do as good a job as they can with that. Not every dollar's worth the same, right? A lot of money is simply dumb money. At my last company, we did $81 million in venture capital from, that's what we raised, and it was from mostly institutional. A couple lessons learned on the next go round is, it's always going to take more money than you think it will. So I know a lot of first-time founders, they get hung up on delusion. I would say focus more on the partner and take more capital than you think you want, because it's, compared to later, it's actually cheaper. And it's always going to take you more. That's number one. And then number two, you should be raising sooner than you think you should. So we raised, and again, it's sort of out there, but we raised a $5.2 million total round. We actually have about $3.5 million of that original raise still left. We're pretty efficient here. Cash flow break even this year, profitable next in the current course. So, we raised this, it's a new $8 million in capital. Some of that is focused on some key strategic initiatives, which, I can't really talk about right now, but you wouldn't think, well, why are you raising right now? And it's, again, I'll tell you from experience that the best time to raise is actually when you have cash in the bank and you don't really need it. And it makes that, you don't ever want to do it with a gun to your head. And that's the best advice I can give to first-time founders.
There's a big push on social media. And again, you sort of get into these cycles, right? And we saw what happened over the last few years. A lot of people talking about bootstrapping, but a lot of what you're talking about is raise a lot of money, do it. What's your approach, and why do you think raising money is and not to say there's one right way to do it, but like, I think we both lean towards you should raise money and you should bring in and grow faster, but we've seen a lot on the bootstrapping. And so I'm just curious, for anyone that believes in that or they're pushing that, why it's important to take capital on.
Well, look, my very first company was an engineering services firm. That was bootstrapped and took much longer to get to where I wanted to be from a revenue level, right? Then I went the VC route, and this one, we went VC route almost immediately, because a couple of valuable lessons learned is, if you're taking, obviously it's got to be the right investors. And unfortunately there is what gives this VCs a bad name is there are some vultures, right? That's why, it's called vulture capital sometimes. And and it's like anything else. It's a few bad apples reputationally impact people. And for the most part, most of the VCs I've ever dealt with have been nothing but supportive, They bring their network, and these are all reasons to do it. They're supportive. They bring their networks. They bring you advisors. My VCs have, even for this one, have brought me advisors. There's no way they're associated with this company. I don't reach these people without that access. And that's the very definition of smart money. And smart money lets you move so much faster than you would if you're bootstrapping, right? And think about this from a competitive disadvantage or advantage, if you will, is if you're in the same space doing sort of the same thing as another company and they have capital and you don't, who's going to be able to move faster? Who's going to be able to do more marketing and sales, right? Who's going to get distribution? And this is the other little hint for first-time founders. It's almost never about technology, almost always about distribution. That's how you scale a business, and you scale it efficiently and effective. And, I don't view it as, look, sir, we took a bunch of investors, but I now have a cap table loaded with people that have a financial interest in making sure I'm successful. And as a result of that, I can get to almost any team owner. I can get to professional athletes. I can get to people that matter in the sports media space. It's putting into the context of what we're doing. And that's super valuable. And, I come down on the idea of I'd much rather have, look, would you rather own 10% of Amazon or 100% of a bootstrap company, right? Like,
Right.
sort of, that's an extreme example, but you get the point, right? It's, X times Y equals Z. And at the end of the day, it's the only number that really matters is the Z. It's, number of shares times the value of those shares and equals the outcome, right?
So, okay, you raise 5 million. Let's just say you see a lot of $3 million rounds. Let's say someone takes your advice and they go raise 5 and they do it. A problem a lot of, at least I see, is founders then don't know, even if they had capital, they don't know what to do with it. From our conversations even here and before and privately, like, you obviously have very strategic initiatives of why you're raising capital and what you're doing with it. How should people be thinking about that? Because there are a lot of companies you could give them money, or founders is probably the better term than just companies, and they don't even know how to manage it or what to do with it. How do you think about that side of, once you have it, now here's where it needs to go and how we need to manage it?
Well, so that should be table stakes. Like, before we ever raise, I know exactly how we're going to spend that capital. That money is already spent by the time we raise it, in a sense. And that is one of the things you should do, is you should understand the purpose for the capital that you're raising, right? If you're early on, are you raising because you need to build a dev team? And by the way, if you need to build a dev team, please tell me you have the resumes ready. Like, I did a lot of investing myself while I was, sort of waiting out, if you will. And whenever someone was early stage and said, "Hey, we're investing to build out dev," great. The first question I ask is, tell me about these hires that you're bringing on. And if they didn't actually have those hires identified, it sort of turned me off, because, that money should already be spent, right? In terms of if you're going to raise, and that's truly understanding what your need is and how to deploy it. And that's the thing is, understand how you're going to deploy that capital, right? Is critical, before you actually go and raise that pile of cash. Otherwise, what you do get is you get waste, or you get this mad rush of, now I need to go out and hire a bunch of people. Overhead walks around on two legs, is an old saying, right? So you can waste a lot of time. So that I think is some advice I would give, again, first time founders who are doing this. But there should be a well-defined use for all that capital, or don't raise it, actually.
Yeah. And obviously an advantage you had is you have internal engineers, and those are your co-founders, which is usually the most optimal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now on your side, you're mainly an engineer-based company, right? Like, you're out front. I'm sure with the growth initiatives, you're bringing in some more, we'll call it management type roles or sales type roles. But what, how have you thought about that? Where for the most part, I think you have 13 employees, and you're the only one not on the engineer side. Like, what's the thinking around that?
The thinking around that is, again, because early on, we knew we were going to sort of attack the professional space. Early on, I didn't really need any help landing those customers, because, again, you can, the tier ones you can count on your fingers and your toes, right? So we have those that we're attacking, and the rest, there's really not that many of them. So the other thought process was, look, the product only launched a year ago, so every time we brought on a new customer, it identified feature gap and things we had to do. So I've had to very carefully meter how many new customers we can bring in. I could have a lot more customers right now. And that's also a discipline. I think early on, a lot of companies mistake. They go and they look like they almost have product market fit. They grab as many new customers as they can. It buries their engineering team where they can't keep up with, with the features, or there's feature creep. And then it gets into a situation where the product isn't what it should be. So in essence, it's a strategy around patience that we've been executing, because we bring on a new customer, identifies these features. I have, engineer capacity. This is a very complicated product. You can only ramp it up so fast. You got to be very careful about that. And so, good would it be to bring on a bunch of biz dev or marketing or whatever if we couldn't absorb the customers that we brought on? So
Hmm.
it's been really around there. Now that's going to switch soon as we push down to the youth, and we're going to spend more money on business development, really relationships. It's funny, but that what that fragmentation has done in youth sports has led to, as you know, it's a very relationship centric and focused business. And so it's sort of important that when you do go to market, you can't just have a smart product, right? Your EQ's got to be as high as your IQ when you attack that marketplace, and you got to make sure you do that the right way. So we will invest in that business development, relationship, kind of go to market, if you will, in that market. But that will start to change as we scale. We're a very senior team here. I think my youngest employee is like 36 years old.
Hmm.
That's also sort of lesson learned, is like you don't need as much management if they're more senior, and so you can get away with a flat organization. And we've done a lot of that too.
Yeah, very cool. And to close it out, John, what areas in sports? Obviously, you came in, you sort of grasped everything pretty quickly. I'd say over a 2-year period, who to get to, what to do, the problems that which are usually the opportunities, right? What are you looking at from, call it more a macro perspective across sports in general? It could be areas you're attacking, or just in generic, what's interesting or important to you to have an eye on in sports.
For myself, it's just there's a couple of things that are amazing to me. One thing on the pro side, and a couple of things on the youth side. On the pro side, I think what's amazing to me is sort of the media landscape, and interesting to me. And that, I mean, if you think about sports, it's the only thing people watch live now, right? So it's the only media, and that's sort of interesting how almost all these services and the media rights have centered around now. Media is centered around sports, and what are the opportunities as you sort of tie media to professional sports? And again, I include college and professional sports as well. I think amateurism is probably dead at this point.
Way gone.
Way gone. So that's sort of something where I think there are opportunities as we look outside, say, the immediate circle around the pro and college level, and that's more long term. And we're looking at that and looking at what type of investments we can do to be strategic in the long term around there. And then on the youth side, I'm amazed at the investment Americans. I'm sure it's like this way in Europe. I don't know, because my focus has been America and North America, in children and their youth, and the level of investment that the American consumer spends on travel sports. Five to $25,000 dollars per year, depending on the sport. I mean, I had two sons that play travel hockey, so you know.
That's up there.
Let me tell you something. I'm thankful that the other ones now do like travel lacrosse or basketball and football. So it does fascinate me about the level of spend, the level of investment, and understanding that dynamic. And I've got a perspective on it, which is, I think, one of the places we're developing. I think one of the reasons, we talk about, you see generally in society like how, quote unquote, digital we are and disconnected human beings are. But what I've noticed about the travel sports, just being in it, is I think one of the reasons, parents do invest in at that level is it's for them too, and not the way you're thinking. It's not like they're trying to live through their kid. It's that they become friends with the other parents. They go on the road. They're in the hotel. They're in the hotel bar. They're having a good time. They do things in the cities they're visiting. It's like mini vacations, almost for an entire season, right? And that is something that I've been watching. It's almost like a behavioral thing, and I think there's going to be opportunities again as after you kind of go outside the immediate circle of just the actual sport of youth sport. I think there's technology plays and there's go to market plays there too, and so that's like I said, that's sort of where I'm watching that part.
Yeah, and not to add on to your point, but some of my parents' best friends are all from me and my brother's AAU basketball teams.
Yeah.
And then when people ask, "Oh, you got a full scholarship to go to college?" If you ask me that, I'll say yes. If you ask my parents, I'll be like, it was discounted. There was a lot of things it took to make that happen." So it's interesting, but
Of
yeah,
course.
super cool. Well, John, appreciate you coming on. This was interesting. We'll have to get you back on as to get some more youth sports insights as you dive deeper into that over the next couple of years.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I really appreciate it.